It's dark on the planet Iris as Alexis Wolfe pants and runs through the undergrowth back towards her ship, the Dead Reckoning. She's clutching in her arms a small crystal fragment that she recovered from the nest of those undead crab creatures. And as she runs and pants and just feels the weight of exhaustion and exertion over her, a faint beeping begins to sound in her helmet. She stops and looks around. It's so dark, the only things she can see is the small tunnel that's illuminated by the built-in lights on her suit. That beeping continues, and she has a sudden realization, a sudden moment of terror as she looks at the display for her suit, and her power levels have dropped below 10%. A normal environmental suit should be able to last for days without having to recharge. Hers has barely lasted 6 hours. At that moment, she suddenly remembers all of her other gear that was drained of power. And she looks down at the crystal in her hands, and she thinks, is this the thing? Is this the thing that drained the power of my weapons? It has to be. Whatever energy it's emanating, it's causing problems. I can't take this back to the ship. I was going to try and get closer to the ship before I left it somewhere, but I can't even carry it with myself because I don't know how long that 10% will last if I keep this. And so she looks around for a tree. She pulls out a small spade and begins furiously digging away at the earth around the base of this large, gnarled tree. And then she wraps the crystal in a small bag and tucks it into this hole that she's dug. And then she fills the dirt back into the hole. Finally, she draws her sword once again, and she cuts a series of scores into the side of this tree. Having finished that, she sheathes the sword, puts the spade away, takes a deep breath, and says, I hope I can find my way back here in the morning. I hope I make it to morning. And then she turns and starts running. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures, the solo actual play podcast where stories are told at the speed of dice. With me, Steve Morrison, your game master and solo player. Now come on, let's grab the dice and see where our story goes. Welcome back to Season 3, Cry Havoc, as we begin Episode 4. Last time, Wolfe tried to create an energy source to draw away the undead crab creatures that were surrounding this crystal. But she quickly realized that all of her tech had been drained of power. And even her suit was losing power faster than it should. She decided that she couldn't just wait around all night, but that she should at least examine what these creatures are doing so that she could formulate a plan to get towards that crystal. So she found a knot in this massive dead tree trunk where this nest was located, and she climbed up to it. But unfortunately for her, the tree has been dead for a while, and that dead wood gave way, and she fell directly into the nest, surrounded by these undead crab-like creatures. Instead of trying to flee, she decides to make a play for the crystal. So she fights her way through the creatures and manages to shatter the upper third of the crystal. She grabs a shard and makes a run for the exit. Even though some of these crab creatures try to cut her off, she's able to fight her way out into the fading light outside. She starts to head back to her ship, but is waffling over whether or not she should find a place to hole up and rest rather than heading immediately back to the ship in the dark. And that's where we left off. And so we pick up with her having now realized that her suit battery is running dangerously low. Now, her gear, most of it, has solar chargers. And so if she can make it to the morning, or if she makes it back to her ship, she should be able to recharge the batteries on all of her gear in the sunlight. Obviously, that also presupposes that she makes it out of this thick forest that she's in order to get some of that sunlight on her chargers. She had to place this crystal in a hiding spot, and now she is making her way back to her ship. Let's ask the question here, and I think this is a good question for the Oracle, which is, does her suit have an internal direction system and mapping system that will give her a line back to her ship? Or is that a separate device that she carries around with her that is no longer full of charge, and then she is therefore directionless? So I think it is likely that the suit has its own directional navigating system. So let's say it's likely. So 75 or less on our D100 will be a yes. 22, which is a yes, and because it is a 22, I believe that may actually be a random event. So a match on your Oracle dice when rolling on the yes-no table indicates an extreme result, interesting twist, or dramatic complication. Okay, so we got a yes, and we got a 22, so I think that is going to be maybe a minor extreme result. So yes, her suit has a built-in navigating system. I guess the complication or twist or whatever on that could be that it doesn't have enough power to operate that functionality. So let's ask the fate chart that. I don't think that's the case. I feel like that's pretty unlikely, just because I think that would be a pretty fundamental part of the suit, and she still has 10% battery left. She's not down to like 2 or 1% battery where it might turn off some of those other functions. So I think it's pretty unlikely. 61 on the dice, which is a no. So she has power. That's not the sort of extreme result, interesting twist, or dramatic complication. So I'm not really coming up with something off the top of my head. And since this was a minor sort of question and result, I'm just going to move on because I can't think of anything that particularly applies in this moment. And I don't want to dwell on it for too long. So let's move on and say that she has power to her systems. She has a connection back. And because of that, I think that she can just roll set a course rather than having to turn this into a journey back, because she has a direct line back to her ship. So we're going to set a course. This is going to be rolling plus supply. Our supply is sitting at 3 right now. So I'm going to roll my D6 and I'm going to add my 3 to that, and then compare that to my 2d10 challenge dice. Here we go. Let's hope for a good roll. 8 for the action score, a 1 and a 2 on the challenge dice for a strong hit. So on a strong hit, you reach your destination and the situation there favors you. Take +1 momentum. We're going to move our momentum from 4 to 5. So I think what that tells us is that she is able to make it back to the ship, even in the dark. And she still has power in her suit. Maybe it is because she left that crystal behind. Maybe it's for some other reason that the suit has not been diminishing. As she makes her back to her ship, sort of in the dead middle of the night, and she is exhausted. if it wasn't for the fact that her suit could potentially run out of energy overnight, I think she probably would have tried to find a place to camp and rest. But because she had to push her way back, she makes it back into the vicinity of the Dead Reckoning. And while her navigational system has been working and getting her back here, I think maybe her comm system was on the fritz, maybe because of interference from being deep inside of this thick forest. Maybe there was some sort of interference from the energy source or those undead creatures. It's hard to say. But as she stumbles out into the clearing where she landed the Dead Reckoning, I think the comm activates, and Valkyrie, the overseer module on her ship, says, "Wolfe, are you all right? You have been outside of communication for 8 hours. I was beginning to worry." Wolfe, I think, is like, "Val, I'm all right. It's okay. I'm coming into the ship. I need you to do me a favor, though. Before you let me into the ship, can you just scan my suit and make sure I'm not carrying anything weird? I came into contact with some undead, weird creatures, and I picked up a crystal that had some strange energy source, and it drained all of the batteries in my laser pistol and weapons. So if you could just scan me and make sure I'm not bringing something out of the ship that's going to cause any problems." Val says, "Commencing scan now." Is there anything there? I think there's a small chance. So 10 or less will be a yes. 76 is a no. So Val scans her and says, "You appear all clear, despite the fact that your suit is covered in strange substances. None of them seem to be harmful to the ship." Wolfe says, "That's good to hear. Thank you. I'm coming on board and prepare a full decontamination." And she boards the ship and undergoes a full decontamination before she emerges from her suit. She is now on her ship in the safety of the Dead Reckoning, and she has a few more hours before daylight. So I think she immediately just crashes and goes to bed. And when she wakes up, she groggily gets out of her small bunk and makes some coffee and has a small protein bar for breakfast, and just her body aches in a way that it has not in quite a while. And Valkyrie says, "Wolfe, you seem to be having an elevated heart rate. Are you all right?" And Wolfe says, "Yeah, Val, I'm okay. I just had, I had to draw my sword. And even though they were just creatures, well, it brings back a lot of memories." Valkyrie says, "I'm sure you did what you had to." Wolfe cracks a half smile and says, "Thanks, Val. I appreciate you. We should figure out what's going on with this crystal, and then I have to go find it, because I buried it somewhere, and I'm pretty sure I remember the route. There should be a marker in my suit's navigational display, but there are a lot of trees in that forest, and it's a little overwhelming. So let's try to figure out what's going on with that crystal and that energy. Maybe we can run some tests off of the scans that I made while I was fighting those creatures and see what we can determine." So Wolfe is going to sit down at a screen, and she's going to pull up the data that was being recorded in her environmental suit. And I think this is something that is probably standard to environmental suits, is they just record external data of anything going on around them. So Wolfe is going to sift through that information and try to determine what exactly caused the batteries to drain. And I think we're going to do a little bit of gather information for this. So we're searching for clues, conducting an investigation, analyzing evidence, doing research. We're going to roll plus wits. Here we go. 7 on the action score. 7 and a 9 for the challenge dice is a miss. Your investigation unearths a dire threat or reveals an unwelcome truth that undermines your quest. Pay the price. Well, I was going to ask the question of whether or not the crystal was the thing that drained the energy, whether or not the undead creatures were the thing that drained the energy, or whether or not it was some interaction between those two things that drained the energy. And obviously, the most damaging, difficult option is for the crystal itself to be the thing that drained the energy cells, because how is she going to get it back to the station without draining her ship of energy? And if she does take it back and they can't figure out a way to utilize this crystal and the energy it's outputting safely, I mean, they could end up draining the whole station of energy and just accelerating the orbital decay. But since I rolled a miss, I think I just have to go with the worst option, which is it's definitely the crystal that is making the problem. So Wolfe spends maybe 2 or 3 hours poring over the data and looking at it from a couple of different avenues. And then finally, she just leans back in her chair and puts her hand over her eyes and just sort of pinches the bridge of her nose and says, Val, I don't see any other way to look at it. That crystal is definitely causing problems. It's somehow interacting with the native energy stored in the batteries and leaching it out. And I'm sure there are probably some interesting applications for something like that, but I don't know that it's even something that is viable for creating energy for the station. That's a question for Dr. Winter. How am I going to get this back? I need to create some sort of nullifying field in order to stop it from draining the energy of the things around it. So that is her next project. That's the next thing that she's going to work on, is creating some sort of container that will neutralize that energy source so that it is not draining the batteries of those things around it. So what she needs is some sort of Faraday cage for this crystal. And that feels like it would be some sort of construction or that she'd have to put this together. You know what? Actually, there's the check your gear move, and check your gear is all about looking to see if you have a specific helpful item or resource. She may have a Faraday cage. I'm sure there are plenty of things in this universe that you don't want just sitting out and, sending out bad vibes. So let's do that. Let's check our gear. Maybe she has something on the ship already that she can use and maybe just modify a little bit in order to get it where it needs to be to block out this energy source. So let's check our gear. Once again, we'll roll plus supply. This is +3. Here we go. 9 on the action score, 5 and a 1 on the challenge dice, a strong hit. We get a momentum off of that, takes us up to 6 momentum. And on a strong hit, you have it and are ready to act. Perfect. So she has this Faraday cage. She looks it over and she says, there are multiple settings for different energy sources and different outputs. So I think this will work. I've just got to go find the crystal and put it in there. I'll test it out with a couple batteries. We'll make sure that it doesn't drain anything before I bring it back onto the ship. So that is what she's going to do. So I think that's worth another mark of progress here as she's trying to recover a crystal sample. She has made significant progress towards being able to transport this crystal. So now she's got to make her way back to where she left it off. And this is the nice thing about the fact that her navigational computer inside of her suit was operational through that whole endeavor. She does have a marker on her digital map that shows where she was and where she needs to go. So I think we can just set a course once again to get there. The reason I'm continuing to do this set of course, even though she knows the route and we could just skip over that and just say she's back at the crystal, is because I've set up that there are some maybe dangerous creatures in this forest, and there are probably other dangers as well. We know there are sinkholes and quagmires and all these different things. And so rolling on set a course is giving the dice an opportunity to create drama. And that's what we're here for, drama. So let's roll plus supply and see if anything interesting happens. Going to be a 9 on the action score, an 8 and a 10 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. So not the full drama, but a half drama. So on a weak hit, you arrive but face a cost or complication. Choose one. Suffer costs en route, make a suffer move at -2 or make 2 suffer moves, or face a complication at the destination. Envision what you encounter. All right, here we go. I've got a question for the Oracle, and I think it's probably a pretty obvious question. Wolfe did not necessarily dig a 6-foot hole to bury this crystal under. I think she dug a few feet down, but it's not buried super deep underground. So, as it has now been multiple hours since she was there, did something come along and dig it up and haul it away? Because we know that there's some sort of complication, I'm going to say that it's likely that that's what happened. That there is something about this energy source that draws creatures in. Maybe it's not even the undead crab creatures that she fought off. Maybe it's a different creature that is drawn to it. So I'm going to say it's likely, which is 75 or less on our D100. Here we go. 64 is a yes. Something dug it up and carried it away. So let's envision this. She shows up at the site and she's looking around. She sees the tree in the distance with the marks on it from her sword, and it matches up with the location on her map. And then she makes her way over there and she just stands there and stares down at this pile of dirt that has been rifled through and pulled aside. And there is now an empty hole where the crystal was buried. And she's standing there looking at it, and she just says, "You've got to be kidding me. All this for a little crystal that probably won't even do anything anyways." She takes a deep breath and then exhales it slowly and starts to look around for tracks or whatever took this crystal away. So let's roll some gather information again. Plus wits of +2. Here we go. 7 on the action score, a 10 and a 2 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. On a weak hit, the information provides new insight, but also complicates your quest. You think? Envision what you discover, then take +1 momentum. So our momentum is slowly inching up, which is good. We're at 7 now out of 10. And we provide a new insight, but a complication arises as well. In order to determine what sort of complication, we should roll up at least the basics of what this creature is that might have dug it up and drug it away, so we can get a sense of what we're facing. So I'm going to roll up a creature. Let's roll up the scale. 51 is medium, so it is person-sized. That's fun. And I'm going to roll on the land options here. 31, avian or winged. Great. So it is some sort of flying creature. Okay, so that is the complication. It is a flying creature. So she looks around. She sees where the pit is, this hole that she dug has been dug up, and she sees that there are tracks around it of something. And then she looks a little bit further away from where the tree's located, and the tracks just disappear. They stop. And then she is sort of looking around and up, and she sees a spot where some of the leaves of these overhanging trees have been disturbed. And she's like, I wonder if whatever took it flew up there. Val, can you read me? And let's ask the Oracle, can Val read her? Has she gone far enough in, or is there any sort of interference? I think it is very likely that Val can hear. So that'll be 75 or less. We got a 12, which is definitely a yes. So Valkyrie says, Your transmission is coming through clearly. What can I do for you, Wolfe? And Wolfe says, Val, can you run a scan of the surrounding area for any flying creatures? While you're at it, can you run a scan for that energy signature? Maybe if we're lucky, you'll be able to track the specific signature to wherever it was taken. Oh, by the way, the crystal that I'm out here for, something dug it up and took it. Valkyrie says, I guessed as much, Wolfe. Give me a moment. And Wolfe leans up against the tree and closes her eyes for a moment. And the information provides new insight. So I think Valkyrie comes back and says, Wolfe, I am detecting the energy signature, and it is 3 kilometers south of you. Would you like me to add a marker on your suit's navigation map? Wolfe says, yes, Val, please update the digital map. South, that's definitely not the direction of the nest. So, well, hopefully I'm not going to find another nest. I'm headed that way. And she is going to start making her way south in the direction of this crystal. Let's set another course because, once again, she's not necessarily, she knows what her destination is. So I think we can continue to just set a course and roll plus supply. Here we go. 7 on the action score, 7 and a 9 on the challenge dice for a miss. On a miss, you are waylaid by a significant threat and must pay the price. If you overcome the obstacle, you may push on safely to your destination. Well, there just so happens to be a planet-side peril table to roll on, so let's do that. This is a life-bearing planet, so we'll roll our D100. 28 blocked or impassable path. Interesting. Okay, so let's envision this. Wolfe is trudging through the undergrowth of this jungle planet, and she is making her way south, and she is definitely on the lookout for sinkholes and quagmires. It is pretty intense and exhausting, and she really only got maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep before she woke up to try and resolve this whole crystal thing before dark again so that she could get back to the station, because she needs to get back to the station as quickly as possible, really. So she's making her way through and is just feeling that lack of sleep. And I think maybe a couple hours into her trek, she activates an injector on her suit and just takes an injection of caffeine straight to the blood source, and it sort of helps to buoy her for a moment, and she shakes it off and heads further into this jungle world. She comes to this section of the forest where the canopy actually opens up. Like, there's an absence of trees, and she is curious as to, on this world that is so full of vegetation and life, that is so full of these towering trees with thick canopies, why there would be this opening here. Obviously, she has found openings before. She found one where she landed the Dead Reckoning, but why here? And that was just an open, sort of almost grassland plain in between 2 of these heavily forested areas. But this, there's no evidence of a transition from a forest to a plain. There are trees around her. Then there's an open canopy, and then she sees a lot more trees on the other side. So she continues drawing closer and closer, and it's when she gets close that she realizes why there's this opening in the canopy. So far, she has dealt with a lot of different small sinkholes. What she finds here is a massive channel of earth and trees that have fallen in, and it goes down at least 100, 200 meters, and she can see the gnarled branches and the vegetation down there. And it looks relatively fresh, like it may have just happened in the last week or two. And she's looking at this and just shakes her head and says, "Really? All right." And she looks to one side, she looks to the other side. It goes on for, at least a kilometer in each direction. She's like, "I could walk around it. It's a lot of walking around on this world. But maybe I can cross it here." And she is going to rifle around in her bag looking for that grappling hook and her gear that would allow her to cross this area. Now, because I've already established that she has a grappler, I'm not going to roll to check our gear. I'm just going to roll face danger as she sets it up and fires it across. And we're going to roll this plus wits. +2, here we go. 5 on the action score, 1 and a 10 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. Success, but not without a cost. Make a suffer move. I think it's pretty straightforward that it's just going to be supply. We're going to lose a supply. We'll go down to 2 now. So she fires this grappling hook across into a living tree. This time she learned her lesson. And she is now going to set up a line that will allow her to cross this chasm. She makes it to the other side and she continues on her way towards where this crystal is located. She gets within a few hundred meters of it and she begins to slow down and look around, trying to find exactly where this crystal is located and definitely watching out for the creature that took it. So we're going to roll plus wits as we gather information once again. 8 on the action score, 2 and a 3 for the challenge dice for a strong hit. +2 momentum, that'll take us up to 9. That's good. And the path you must follow or action you must take to make progress is made clear. Here's another question for the Oracle. Is the creature that took this crystal present? I think it's 50-50. I could see it going either way. So 50 or less will be a yes. 20. Yes, it is. All right, let's get some looks at this creature. So we're going to roll a first look. 67 mandibles or pinchers. And 81 prominent tail. So Wolfe sees another nest, but this time it's more of a nest like you would expect from a bird. It's up in a tree, and she can see that there are all sorts of branches and leaves and all these things sort of woven together to make this large nest. And while she's watching and looking at it, she sees the creature moving around. And it's almost as big as she is. It seems to be walking around on 2 legs with a long tail that hangs out and mandibles clicking on either side of its face with these long, almost leathery wings extended out. Wolfe sees this creature and almost without thought, her hand strays to the hilt of her sword and a very focused expression comes over her face. But then the creature sort of moves to the other side of the nest and out of her view, and she releases the hilt of the sword, and that extreme focus fades away, and Wolfe sighs. And then she looks up at that nest, and prepares to climb. She's going to try and climb up and steal the crystal. Now, her computer system, her scanner, tells her that it's in that nest. So she's going to try and climb up, reach in, take it out. And she's going to try and do this avoiding confrontation with this creature. To do this, we're going to roll plus shadow. Now, Wolfe's shadow is a 1. So we're going to roll our face danger at +1 here. 2 on the action die, a 4 and a 10 on the challenge dice for a miss. I'm going to burn my momentum down to 2. I had 9 momentum, so I'm going to turn this into a weak hit. On a weak hit, you succeed, but not without a cost. Make a suffer move. I'm going to take a hit to supply again, because I think this represents her using some of her gear to create like a rope that she can lash around the tree and climb with, because she can't just hammer pitons into the tree and climb up without alerting this thing. So she's got to do this as silently as she can. She approaches the trunk of the tree and she lashes a rope around and ties herself off. And then she activates the spikes on the bottom of her boot that come out for climbing, because they're multi-purpose space boots. Why wouldn't they have some sort of grippy functionality? And so she lashes around the tree and begins to climb. She makes her way up, and once she gets to the top and reaches a point where the nest is present, she sort of reaches out a hand and tests the branch underneath one of the sections of this nest, and it seems sturdy enough. Now, Wolfe is pretty strong, and so she then detaches the rope and free climbs her way along this long, thick branch and starts to climb and pull herself up over the lip of this nest. And I think as she does so, she sort of like pulls herself up and peeks a little bit over the edge. And this creature, this forge spawn, is standing on the other side, sort of looking out. And those mandibles are click, 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 clicking together. And Wolfe's helmet is translating the sounds so that she can hear them as she hears these click, click, clicks, and the rustle of those leathery wings sort of creaking as they flex in the wind. And Wolfe sees that there are several eggs on the other side that this creature is standing by. And that crystal is on this side of the nest. And so Wolfe slowly pulls herself up and crawls forward as carefully and cautiously as possible, trying to avoid any sort of creaking or crunching of root or leaf. And she finally reaches out with her hand and grabs hold of the crystal, and she pulls it back. She opens the bag, which has the Faraday cage that she found on her ship in it, and she slides that into the cage. She seals it, and then she creeps her way back and away from this nest, over the edge, back along the limb to where her ropes are tied off. She ties herself back in, and then, sweating and aching from yesterday and today's exertion, she climbs down the rest of the way and gets out of there. And I think that's worth another couple marks of progress on our vow. And we're now up to 8 out of 10 progress. she gets a little bit away from where this creature is, and then she sets up her cage. She pulls out some batteries and checks their charge. A couple of them are showing that they've been drained a little bit, but it was so fast that they weren't fully drained. And she takes the crystal back to the plane, and it's not really sunny because this planet has almost perpetual cloud cover, but there's enough sun coming through the clouds that it is able to charge up slowly some of the battery packs. And she's watching it for an hour or two, and they don't seem to be draining. So she is going to then, satisfied with her conclusion, return to the Dead Reckoning and return to Scirocco Station with this crystal in tow. And we are going to go ahead and fulfill our vow here. When you reach the end of your quest, roll the challenge dice and compare to your progress. We've got 8 progress. Here come the challenge dice. I've got a 1 and an 8 on the challenge dice, so that is a weak hit. As above, but there is more to be done, or you realize the truth of your quest. If you swear an iron vow to set things right, take your full legacy reward. Otherwise, make the reward 1 rank lower. So the Dead Reckoning lifts off the planet Iris and arcs up towards the station. She docks in the docking bay and, carrying the Faraday cage hidden away in a shoulder bag, heads towards level 6, where the Radiant Council lab is hidden behind the veneer of the Brightman Initiative. She enters the lab, and at this point, the VI knows to let her through, and she walks the hallways to Dr. Winter's office. Now, as she was coming back to the station, she sent Dr. Winter a message. The good doctor didn't pick up, but she left a message, a vague one, saying, "I found it. I'm on my way back. I'll see you in a little bit." When Wolfe arrives at the Radiant Council labs, she's walking through the halls, and in her very brief experience, there are usually at least 1 or 2 people wandering around these halls, researchers. There are a couple of guards present. This time, however, she doesn't see anyone as she's walking through the halls, and she reaches Dr. Winter's office and knocks. The door opens, and Wolfe enters, and Dr. Winter is sitting behind the desk, hands folded over, waiting. And Wolfe looks around and looks at Dr. Winter and says, "Are you all right?" And Dr. Winter nods slowly and says, "Yes, I'm all right. You said you have it?" Wolfe nods and pulls out the Faraday cage, sets it on the desk, and explains the discoveries that she made while she was on the planet. Dr. Winter's eyes sort of widen a little bit, and I think we should make another move. It's called Test Your Relationship. When your relationship with a connection is tested through conflict, betrayal, or circumstance, roll plus heart. If you share a bond, add +1. We don't share a bond yet. Dr. Winter is a new connection, so we're going to roll heart, which is +1 for Wolfe. She doesn't connect well to people. Wonder why. 5 on the action score, 4 and a 7 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. Develop your relationship, but also envision a demand or complication as a fallout of this test. So we're going to go to Dr. Winter. We are going to mark 1 on the formidable connection there. We have to envision a demand or complication as a fallout of this test. Well, I think it's a complication because this is going to tie back into our fulfill the vow and realizing the truth of the quest. As Dr. Winter hears all this, her eyes widen a little bit, and then she grows serious, and she makes very firm eye contact with Wolfe, and she says, "That is very interesting, and I appreciate you bringing this back to me. It will be very useful in our research." Wolfe, looking at her, definitely gets the sense that Dr. Winter isn't saying everything that she wants to. Wolfe looks around the room, and it's the same small office with a desk and a computer, and there's like maybe a small couch. There's not a whole lot of art or, anything identifying. It's just very basic. It's a Spartan laboratory. She looks around, she looks back at Dr. Winter, and she mouths, "Are you okay?" And Dr. Winter, very slowly, very purposefully, shakes her head no. Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thanks so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please spread the word, and if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, I'm at Errant Solo Pod on Twitter and Instagram, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Are you looking for a D&D podcast with a dark side? Something more like Game of Thrones and less like Monty Python? Tale of the Manticore is part dark fantasy audio drama, part solo D&D RPG. There's no plot armor here. The dice make all the important decisions. Join me as I resurrect the excitement, wonder, and emotion of old-school D&D. Made for a mature audience, Tale of the Manticore is both a fiction and a game. It's the story where chaos rolls.